Morning light touched the highlands of Ethiopia in soft gold, and the wind moved gently through the grass as Kaldi followed his goats along the hills. He knew every rock and every tree, every quiet path where the animals liked to wander. That day felt ordinary at first, but something in the air seemed different, almost restless. The goats were not grazing calmly. They leaped and spun as if music lived beneath their hooves, their eyes bright and wild with energy. Kaldi laughed at first, thinking it was only playfulness. Yet as the sun climbed higher, he noticed they kept returning to the same dark green shrubs covered in small red berries. Curiosity pulled him closer. He picked one, turning it between his fingers, unsure whether it was safe. The berry tasted sweet at first, then strangely bitter, and a warmth spread through him like a sudden sunrise. His tired legs felt lighter, and his thoughts grew sharp and clear. He watched his goats dance and felt a spark of wonder. Maybe the world held secrets hidden in the smallest things. He carried the berries to a nearby monastery, hoping someone wiser would understand what he had found. The monks listened quietly as he spoke, their faces serious and cautious. One elder frowned, calling the berries dangerous, and tossed them into the fire. Flames licked the fruit, and a deep, rich aroma filled the room. It was warm and comforting, unlike anything they had known before. The monks leaned closer, breathing in the scent, curiosity replacing fear. They pulled the roasted seeds from the ashes, ground them between stones, and mixed the powder with hot water. The first dark cup passed from hand to hand, steam curling toward the ceiling. That night, the monks stayed awake longer than ever before, their prayers steady and focused, their minds clear in the silence of midnight. Something new had entered the world, not through careful planning, but through accident and courage. Years passed, and the story of the strange drink traveled across deserts and seas. Traders carried sacks of beans through markets filled with spices and laughter, and soon the drink reached Yemen, where Sufi mystics embraced it as a companion during long nights of devotion. They roasted beans over open flames, listening to the tiny cracks that signaled transformation. Each mistake taught them patience. Sometimes the brew was too bitter, sometimes too weak, but they kept experimenting, guided by instinct and faith. The drink they called kawa became part of their rituals, warming their hands while they whispered prayers under starlit skies. For them, coffee was more than a beverage. It was a bridge between body and spirit. As the drink spread through Arabia, small gathering places appeared in busy cities. Men sat close together on woven rugs, sharing stories and debates while cups passed from hand to hand. The air buzzed with ideas. Merchants discussed trade routes, poets recited verses, and travelers described distant lands. Coffee turned strangers into companions and silence into conversation. Some leaders feared the growing influence of these gatherings, worried that too much thinking could lead to rebellion. Bans were declared, doors were closed, but people returned again and again, drawn by the warmth of connection and the promise of wakefulness. When coffee reached Europe, it arrived wrapped in mystery. Sailors and merchants spoke of a dark drink from the east that sharpened the mind instead of dulling it. At first, some religious leaders rejected it, calling it dangerous. But curiosity proved stronger than fear. In crowded streets of Venice and London, coffee houses opened their doors to anyone who could spare a coin. Inside, ideas moved faster than ever before. Writers argued about philosophy, scientists shared discoveries, and businessmen planned ventures that would shape the future. The hum of conversation blended with the scent of roasting beans, creating spaces where imagination felt alive. Morning habits began to change. Instead of beer or wine, people reached for cups of steaming coffee, and the world seemed to wake up all at once. Streets filled earlier, workshops grew busier, and minds felt clearer. Artists found inspiration in quiet corners of cafes, sketching while watching strangers pass by. Musicians composed melodies between sips, and thinkers filled notebooks with bold new ideas. Coffee became the rhythm of the day, a small ritual that marked the beginning of thought and creativity. Across oceans, colonial powers carried coffee plants to new lands. A young naval officer guarded a fragile seedling during a long voyage, shielding it from storms and thirst. That single plant would grow into forests of trees across tropical islands, shaping economies and cultures. Farmers worked under blazing suns, nurturing cherries that would travel thousands of miles before reaching distant cups. Not every part of the story was gentle. Wealth and hardship grew side by side, and the drink that inspired revolutions also carried the weight of human struggle. Centuries moved forward, and machines transformed the way coffee was made. In Italy, the hiss of steam gave birth to espresso, a bold and concentrated form that mirrored the speed of modern life. In busy cities, people stood at counters, sharing quick conversations before returning to their work. Later came instant coffee, carried by soldiers and travelers who needed comfort in uncertain places. Each invention reshaped the relationship between humans and the drink, yet the essence remained the same, a moment of warmth in a restless world. In a small cafe in Paris, a writer sat by the window, watching rain fall on cobblestones. The cup before him cooled as he searched for words, and when he finally lifted it, ideas began to flow like a river breaking free from ice. Across the ocean, a factory worker paused during a long shift, holding a cup that reminded him of home. In a quiet village, an elderly woman brewed coffee slowly, savoring the ritual as much as the taste. Every person carried a different story, yet all were connected by the same dark liquid. The legend of Caldi and his dancing goats faded into myth, but its spirit lived on in every new discovery. Coffee taught humanity that accidents could lead to beauty, that curiosity could change history. People gathered not only for energy, but for connection, sharing laughter and silence in equal measure. A simple bean became a symbol of possibility, reminding the world that transformation often begins in unexpected places. As technology advanced, cafes evolved into creative hubs filled with glowing screens and soft music. Students studied late into the night, fueled by cups that kept sleep at bay. Entrepreneurs sketched plans on napkins, dreaming of ventures that might reshape the future. Friends reunited after years apart, their conversations stretching long into the evening. Coffee was no longer just a drink. It was a language spoken without words, an invitation to pause and be present. Even in the quietest mornings, when the world felt still, the ritual of brewing coffee carried echoes of history. The sound of beans grinding resembled distant thunder, the rising steam a reminder of ancient fires. Each sip connected past and present, linking modern lives to shepherds, monks, traders, and dreamers who once held similar cups beneath different skies. The journey from wild berry to global symbol revealed something essential about humanity, the desire to explore, to experiment, and to share. In crowded markets of Istanbul, the clink of cups echoed through narrow streets, while storytellers captivated listeners with tales of adventure. In bustling offices of New York, workers hurried between meetings, coffee in hand, chasing ambitions that stretched toward the horizon. In quiet homes across the world, families gathered around small tables, beginning their days with warmth and conversation. The drink adapted to every culture, yet its heart remained unchanged. Some said coffee made people faster, others believed it made them wiser. Perhaps it simply gave them time, a small pause between moments, a chance to breathe and reflect. The world grew louder and more complex, but the act of holding a cup remained simple and familiar. It offered comfort during lonely nights and celebration during joyful mornings. The story of coffee continued to unfold with every new generation. Farmers experimented with flavors, roasting styles evolved, and cafes became spaces of creativity and belonging. Artists painted scenes of bustling coffee houses, capturing the glow of lanterns and the quiet intensity of conversation. Writers described the bittersweet taste as a metaphor for life itself, both strong and delicate. And somewhere, in a place untouched by time, the image of a young goatherd watching his animals dance remained alive in memory. His curiosity had opened a door that millions would walk through, changing how humanity worked, thought, and connected. The accidental discovery became a legacy carried across centuries, reminding the world that greatness often begins with a simple question: what happens if we try? Every cup held a piece of that journey. Every aroma carried whispers of distant mountains and ancient fires. Coffee became more than a drink. It became a companion to human progress, standing quietly beside revolutions, inventions, and everyday moments of kindness. It witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the birth of ideas, and the quiet resilience of people who found strength in shared rituals. As the sun set over a modern city, lights flickered on in cafes filled with laughter and music. Strangers met and became friends, conversations stretched into stories, and dreams took shape in the space between sips. The world kept moving, always faster, always changing, yet the simple act of drinking coffee remained a constant thread tying humanity together. And in that endless flow of mornings and evenings, one truth lingered softly: the story of coffee was never only about beans or cups. It was about the human spirit, curious, imperfect, and endlessly creative, turning an accidental discovery into a symbol of connection that continues to warm hands and awaken minds across the world. The night grew quieter as the last voices faded from the cafe, yet a single lamp still glowed near the window. A young woman sat alone with her notebook open, tracing thoughts that felt too heavy to carry without words. Outside, rain brushed against the glass, and inside, the soft aroma of coffee lingered like a memory that refused to leave. She lifted her cup slowly, feeling the warmth travel through her hands, and wondered how many people before her had sat just like this, searching for clarity, for courage, for a beginning. Across the ocean, dawn arrived in a farming village where rows of coffee trees stretched toward the hills. A farmer walked between them, brushing his fingers along the branches heavy with red cherries. Each berry held months of patience, each harvest a quiet promise that the world would continue its endless conversation. He remembered stories told by his grandfather, tales of how the plants first came to their land, carried by travelers who believed the seeds would change their future. The work was hard, the sun unforgiving, but there was pride in knowing that somewhere far away, someone would pause for a moment of peace because of what grew here. In a crowded city apartment, a tired student stared at a screen filled with unfinished ideas. The night had been long, and doubt crept into every corner of the room. He reached for his mug without thinking, letting the bitter taste wake something inside him. Slowly, words began to form again. Coffee did not solve his problems, but it gave him the courage to keep trying, to stay awake long enough for inspiration to return. Outside his window, the city hummed with life, each person carrying their own quiet struggles and hopes. Long ago, in the narrow streets of Vienna, musicians gathered in warm cafés to escape the cold. A young composer listened to the rhythm of spoons against porcelain and found melodies hidden within the sound. The drink before him felt like a companion, keeping his thoughts alive long after midnight. He scribbled notes on scraps of paper, unaware that one day his music would echo through grand halls, born partly from those quiet evenings with a steaming cup beside him. The journey of coffee continued to leaves in ways both grand and ordinary. In Istanbul, a storyteller captivated listeners with tales of travelers crossing deserts under starlight, his voice rising and falling like waves. Each pause between stories was filled with the clink of cups and the murmur of appreciation. Coffee houses became places where imagination lived freely, where people could forget their worries for a while and step into worlds shaped by words. Centuries later, a barista in a modern cafe carefully adjusted the grind of fresh beans, watching the dark liquid flow into a small cup. The machine hissed softly, echoing the ancient fires where monks once roasted berries in secret. She handed the drink to a stranger with a gentle smile, never knowing the story that would unfold from that simple exchange. Perhaps it would inspire a conversation or comfort someone after a difficult day. The beauty of coffee lay in its quiet power, the way it created small bridges between lives that might never have touched otherwise. In a quiet village at sunset, an elderly man brewed coffee slowly over a flame, following a ritual passed down through generations. He listened to the bubbling sound as if it were a familiar song. For him, coffee was not about speed or productivity, it was about memory. Each sip carried echoes of family gatherings, laughter shared under open skies, and the wisdom of those who came before him. He closed his eyes and felt the world slow down, grateful for a moment that belonged only to him. Somewhere in a bustling newsroom, journalists gathered around a cluttered table, papers scattered like fallen leaves. Cups of coffee stood half, finished as debates grew louder and ideas collided. The drink fueled not just their energy, but their courage to question and to challenge. Headlines were born between sips, stories that would shape how people saw the world. Coffee had always been close to moments of change, quietly present when voices rose and new paths emerged. A young traveler walked into a small cafe in a foreign city, unsure of the language but comforted by the familiar scent of roasting beans. She ordered a cup with hesitant words, and the barista nodded kindly. Sitting by the window, she watched strangers pass by and felt less alone. Coffee became a universal language, understood without translation, a reminder that even far from home there were places where warmth and kindness waited. As the years moved forward, coffee adapted to every generation. Some preferred it strong and bitter, others sweet and light. New flavors appeared, new traditions formed, yet the heart of the ritual remained unchanged. It was still about the pause, the moment when time slowed just enough for people to breathe, to think, to connect with themselves and with others. In a small art studio, a painter dipped her brush into color while a cup cooled beside her. She believed the aroma helped her see shades more clearly, as if the world itself sharpened with each sip. Paintings filled the walls, each one inspired by moments captured in cafes, markets, and quiet mornings at home. Coffee became part of her creative rhythm, a gentle companion to the flow of imagination. Meanwhile, in a hospital waiting room, a man held a paper cup with trembling hands. The night had been filled with worry, and sleep felt impossible. The warmth steadied him, offering a small comfort during uncertainty. Around him, strangers shared silent understanding, their eyes meeting briefly over steaming cups. Even in places touched by fear, coffee created moments of connection that softened the weight of the world. The legacy of Caldi's discovery lived on not only in grand stories, but in these quiet human scenes. Each person who lifted a cup added another chapter to a story still being written. The drink that began as an accident had become a companion to humanity's joys and struggles, always present yet never demanding attention. As evening settled over another city, lights reflected on wet streets while friends gathered at an outdoor table. Laughter rose into the air, mingling with music from a nearby musician. Cups were raised, conversations deepened, and memories formed that would last long after the last drop was gone. Coffee turned ordinary evenings into moments worth remembering, reminding people that even small rituals could hold great meaning. Somewhere far away, a child watched her parents share a quiet morning together, steam rising between them like a soft cloud. She did not yet understand the history behind that simple scene, but she felt its warmth. One day, she too would grow up and discover her own rituals, her own reasons to pause and reflect. The story of coffee would continue through her, just as it had through countless others. And so the journey moved forward without end, carried in every cup poured at sunrise and every conversation that stretched into the night. Coffee remained what it had always been, a spark born from curiosity, a thread connecting generations, a reminder that even the smallest discoveries can ripple across centuries. The world changed constantly, yet the simple act of sharing a drink endured, weaving together stories of hope, creativity, and human connection that would never truly fade. Morning arrived again, soft and quiet, touching rooftops and narrow streets with pale light. In a small apartment overlooking a busy road, a man stood by his kitchen window, waiting for the kettle to boil. The sound of water heating felt like a promise that the day could begin gently. He had learned to slow down over the years, to treat each cup as a moment of stillness before the noise of the world returned. When the aroma filled the room, memories surfaced without warning, conversations long past, laughter shared with friends who had moved away, and mornings that felt simpler than this one. In another part of the world, a group of farmers gathered before sunrise, their hands rough from years of work. They spoke quietly as they sorted ripe cherries into baskets, the red skins shining in the early light. Each movement carried tradition, knowledge passed from parent to child. The work demanded patience, but there was beauty in the rhythm of it, a reminder that even the smallest seeds could travel farther than anyone imagined. They did not know the faces of the people who would drink the coffee, yet they felt connected to them through the invisible path of effort and hope. A crowded train rattled through a modern city, passengers clutching cups as if they were anchors in the rush of the morning. Some stared out the window, lost in thought, while others spoke into phones, their voices blending into a quiet hum. Coffee became a shared ritual among strangers, a silent acknowledgement that everyone was moving through the same endless cycle of beginnings and endings. For a few brief moments, the warmth in their hands softened the distance between them. In a quiet library, an elderly writer paused between pages, staring at a blank line that refused to fill itself. He remembered the first time he had tasted coffee as a young man, sitting in a crowded cafe with dreams bigger than his fear. That first sip had felt like courage, a small push toward the life he wanted to build. Now, years later, the same taste brought comfort rather than urgency. He lifted the cup slowly, letting the bitterness remind him that every story, like every brew, needed patience to reach its full flavor. As evening fell in a coastal town, fishermen returned from the sea, their boats rocking gently against the dock. They gathered at a small cafe near the shore, exchanging stories of storms and calm waters. Steam rose from their cups into the salty air, and laughter echoed across the waves. Coffee did not erase the hardships of their work, but it offered a pause between effort and rest, a moment where friendship felt stronger than fatigue. In a bustling university courtyard, students debated ideas beneath the shade of old trees. Cups balanced on notebooks while voices grew animated with passion. Some argued about science, others about art, each convinced their vision could change the world. Coffee flowed through their conversations like a quiet current, fueling curiosity and keeping the energy alive long after the sun began to set. The tradition of penny universities lived on in these gatherings where knowledge felt free and alive. A young mother sat alone at her kitchen table after putting her child to sleep. The house was finally quiet, and the soft glow of a lamp wrapped the room in calm. She held her cup with both hands, feeling the warmth settle into her bones. It was not just about staying awake. It was about reclaiming a piece of herself, a moment to breathe and think without interruption. Coffee became her companion in the quiet hours, reminding her that even small pauses could restore strength. Far away, in a city known for its vibrant nightlife, musicians gathered in a dim cafe, instruments resting beside empty cups. They spoke about melodies that refused to come in dreams that felt just out of reach. One by one, they lifted their cups and took slow sips, letting the bitterness ground them. Soon, someone began to hum, and another joined in, and music filled the room. The drink that had once helped monks stay awake during prayer now inspired artists, chasing the fragile spark of creation. In a hospital cafeteria, a nurse leaned against the counter during a brief break, eyes heavy from a long shift. The coffee in her hand felt like a lifeline. a small source of energy that allowed her to keep going. She watched people come and go, families filled with worry, doctors moving quickly, volunteers offering quiet smiles. Each person carried a story, and coffee moved silently through all of them, connecting moments of exhaustion with moments of hope. The world continued to spin, and with it, the rituals of brewing and sharing never stopped. New cafes opened in unexpected places, each with its own atmosphere and stories waiting to unfold. Some were filled with laughter, others with quiet reflection, yet all shared the same invisible thread that stretched back through centuries to a hillside in Ethiopia where goats once danced under a bright sky. As night deepened, a traveler sat alone in an airport lounge, watching planes disappear into the darkness. The hum of engines blended with the soft clink of cups. She thought about how many people were moving across the world at that exact moment, each carrying their own dreams and fears. The coffee in her hands felt familiar, despite the unfamiliar surroundings. A reminder that even in transit, there were small rituals that made the world feel less vast. In a small village cafe, an old storyteller continued to speak long after the crowd had thinned. His voice softened as he described how discoveries often come from accidents, how curiosity could open doors no one knew existed. The listeners leaned closer, captivated not only by his words, but by the quiet magic of the space around them, the warm light, the shared silence, the cups resting between them like tiny bridges. Time moved forward without pause, yet coffee remained a constant companion. It adapted to every culture, every generation, becoming part of celebrations and solitary moments alike. Some people sought its energy, others its comfort, but all found something personal within it. The story of coffee grew richer with every new hand that reached for a cup, every new conversation sparked by its presence. And somewhere, beyond the noise of modern life, the memory of a young Gothard watching his animals leap beneath the sun lingered like a quiet echo. His curiosity had set a chain of events in motion that no one could have predicted. The accidental discovery continued to shape lives in ways both visible and unseen, reminding humanity that even the smallest moments of wonder could ripple across centuries. As the last lights dimmed in the cafe and the door closed softly behind the final guest, the air still carried the faint aroma of roasted beans. Tomorrow, someone new would walk in, searching for warmth, inspiration, or simply a place to pause. The story would begin again, not as a grand event, but as another simple moment, a cup raised, a breath taken, and a world gently awakened once more.